In 1815, amidst the carnage of the Battle of Waterloo, over 20,000 soldiers perished. But here's the twist. Their bodies vanished without a trace. For over 200 years, this chilling mystery remained unsolved until now. Today, you'll find out what happened to the remains of these fallen men, and the answer is more sinister than you could ever imagine. Picture this. The Battle of Waterloo has ended. Napoleon's dreams of empire are crushed, and Europe is left to mourn its dead. But as historians combed through the aftermath, a chilling discovery was made. There were no bodies. For over 200 years, this mystery puzzled experts. Today, we're diving deep into the eerie truth behind what happened to those soldiers. This tale is not for the faint of heart, so buckle up and join us as we unravel the dark secret of Waterloo's missing dead. But before we delve into the grim details, let's set the stage. Napoleon Bonaparte. Remember him from your history classes? The ambitious French emperor who seemed unstoppable? By 1815, Europe had been embroiled in nearly 23 years of continuous war, much of it driven by Napoleon's relentless campaigns. Now he was facing his ultimate test, the Battle of Waterloo. This battle was supposed to secure his dominance or mark his downfall. What do you remember about the Battle of Waterloo from your junior high history class? Anything? Nothing? I could not remember much other than it being something Napoleon was involved with. Now that we are both in for a good lesson, let's settle in and discover what this battle was about. Well, it all started with this short guy bent on ruling the world. Isn't that how all battles start? You must pause to remember that most of Europe had been embroiled in a war for 23 years. Napoleon had brought destruction and death everywhere his armies marched. Now that the British were also declaring war, Napoleon had a lot on his hands. He was facing immediate concerns about two armies converging closer together and realizing their numbers as one would be more than he could surpass. The problem was that the Prussians were beginning to gather an army in the Netherlands and the Anglo-Allied force. The Prussians were being led by Field Marshal Gebhard von Blücher, who had a long reputation before him. The Anglo-Allied force had an equally fierce leader, Field Marshal the Duke of Wellington. Napoleon was desperate. He imagined these two forces would meet, combine, and be far too large for him to overcome. He must strike now, strike quickly, while they are two separate armies. Napoleon wanted to rule all of Europe. His anger at the British involvement caused him to threaten them. Napoleon's plan backfired. On June the 15th, he first attempted to bring his troops across the river Sambre. The very next day, his army pummeled the Prussians at Ligny. Over 20,000 men died on the Prussian side alone, while the French lost approximately 10,000. The same day, Napoleon had other soldiers attempt a separate attack on Wellington's men at Quatre Bras. Wellington retreated. Napoleon would not allow it. He felt he was on his way to fulfilling his dream of being the next Alexander the Great. As most narcissists do, once they are focused on something, they need help to become unfocused. Napoleon pushed, and his men joined up with Wellington, where he had retreated at Waterloo. The Prussians battled fiercely, forcing Napoleon back into a defensive position. While many tactics were used to defend and overtake the Prussians and the French, Napoleon was ultimately defeated. In those battles, nearly 40,000 of Napoleon's men were killed, wounded, or captured. The Anglo-Allies lost over 22,000 men. Ultimately, on July the 7th, at the cost of possibly hundreds of thousands of lives during his reign of terror, Napoleon abdicated. He was forced to spend the rest of his life in exile. War isn't pretty. Now that the war was ending, the last few days saw the numbers that we are aware of: 20,000 Prussians, 50,000 of Napoleon's army, and the Anglo-Allies lost over 22,000. War is a time of chaos. This war took over 23 years and is simply just one set of battles at the war's end. Military specialists and historians estimate the death toll for military personnel in all Napoleonic wars was likely between 2.5 and 3.5 million. Civilian losses may have ranged from 750,000 to 3 million. Now, think about it. That is a lot of bodies. Before we go any further, you should know that the mystery I will reveal is a secret that took over 200 years to solve. While we think we know everything in this modern age, the truth was only revealed and confirmed It took 200 years to solve, which makes me think Winston Churchill had a point. A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. After the battle, one would assume that the soldiers were either sent home or buried in mass graves. Over the years, history experts combed the fields and the many letters and documents surrounding the war. Shortly after the war, there were rumors, but in time, these faded to mere stories, and then even more until few remembered. Over the last 75 years, many archaeological digs have occurred around Europe, including various battle sites. The findings in the fields by those piecing together the past never quite added up to the numbers lost in these battles. In 2012, a focus was placed on the areas surrounding these last battles that ended in Waterloo. We have covered how many bodies were lost, and researchers were stumped then. Today, in 2024, it appears that Belgian historian Bernard Wilkin and German archaeologist and historian Robin Schaefer uncovered the truth. After poring through all the records, letters, and even newspapers of the time, they discovered something horrific had occurred. Human beings at their very lowest. The most recent digs looking for the mass graves covered a large battlefield area that should have held the remains of over 20,000 soldiers. Stunned, the researchers could only find 2 bodies. The 2 researchers have developed an alarming theory: white gold. What is white gold, you might ask? Isn't that just gold that looks a lot like silver? No, something far more sinister. Ground bone meal is one of the best fertilizers you can get. Bone meal contains vital nutrients like magnesium and other vitamins that enrich the soil and bring larger harvests. Bones were referred to as white gold. Bones, animal or human, were used in industrial farming. How can this happen, you ask? Well, in times of war, desperation sets in. People do whatever they must to survive. Sometimes that means financial. In the Waterloo battles, sugar and beet production to make sugar were skyrocketing, requiring supplies for the British and the West with their baking needs and sweetness. Those civilians left broken and putting their homes and lives back together only thought of rebuilding their families. They needed the resources the money brought to them more than they cared about any type of indignation they may suffer in selling the corpses of fallen soldiers. It appears that tens of thousands and possibly hundreds of thousands of fallen soldiers in Europe and other world locations may not have had a peaceful, undisturbed rest. The bones were ground up and used to make fertilizer for farms. They even used ground up bones to filter sugar. Sounds disgusting, but this newly found knowledge will make it a little easier to turn down that next slice of pie. The 2 historians took the information they found and conclusions on what happened to these men and women very seriously. They called it industrial-scale grave robbing. If you want to learn more about how this happened, you can read more in the recently released book by these 2 history researchers, Bones of Contention: The Industrial Exploitation of Human Bones in the Modern Age. While they believe that the practice remained unchanged in the 19th century, it is thought that in some areas of the world, it continued long into the 20th century. They discovered that bones from soldiers in World War I, including American soldiers, seem to have been exhumed and sold for industrial use. The Wall Street Journal recently interviewed co-author Bernard Wilkin. He stated, "We know that there was illegal digging in France after that war. It is very probable that American bones went to factories too." The research into this very hush-hush practice led the pair to discover that legislation by many governments was eventually put into place to restrict shipping human bones for industrial use. Schaefer, who was also interviewed, said, "The evidence is overwhelming. We found it reported in local news sources, even with the police. It was not really discussed even then because it was illegal and frowned upon." The historians went on to speak of missing skeletons from many eras and many battlefields. Schaefer has estimated that there should be nearly 130,000 soldiers, both French and Allied, who died in Frankfurt, Germany. Archaeologists have found a large number of emptied mass graves and could not figure out what happened until now. So, while this gives us all pause, it is still a fantastic thing that history has kept hidden for so long. While you may have known a little about Napoleon and the Battle of Waterloo, we are glad to have been part of the process and informed you better about the weird and sometimes disturbing past we are all taking part in. Next time you see a movie about past wars, we are sure you will bring this up with your friends. You can share this video with them after placing bets that you hold history's truth in your hands.